Welcome to the Restoration Pros Unplugged podcast. In each episode, we're going to bring you insightful interviews and discussions with top restoration industry leaders. We're also going to delve into their business, the strategies that made them successful, and most importantly, the valuable lessons they learned along the way. I'm your host, Clinton James. I'm also the Chief Marketing Officer at Water Restoration Marketing. We're a digital marketing agency dedicated to helping restoration companies nationwide secure more high-value water jobs. Now, this show, it aims to provide you with the knowledge and tools you need to excel in the restoration industry. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. And welcome, folks, to another episode of the Restoration Pros Unplugged podcast. I am your host, Clinton James. I'm also the Chief Marketing Officer at Water Restoration Marketing. We've had some great guests with outstanding resumes on the podcast, but today's a little different. When I looked at this man's accomplishments, and I've looked at all of the seats that he sat in over his restoration journey, I was like, man, we got to get this guy on the podcast so he can talk a little bit about his experience. So welcoming to the podcast today, Ben Justesen. Ben, how are you?
Thank you. I'm doing really well, Clinton.
All right, Ben. So let's try to go through the resume and the accomplishments and kind of the things that you're working on right now. So number one, you're currently an enterprise consultant over at DocuSketch. Is that right?
That is correct.
All right. In another lifetime, you owned a very successful restoration company out of Washington, which is JRCC, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
You also had a training business where you worked with restoration companies on properly estimating using Xactimate?
Yep. That was something that I love to do, still trying to do.
Also, and last but not least, you're also on the board over at RIA, correct?
Yes.
All right. With a resume like that, Ben, I don't even know where to start. Why don't you give the audience a little insight as to how you got into the restoration industry?
Well, I very young. So my dad, he owned a company. He started out doing carpet cleaning, and a lot of people in this industry have started out doing carpet cleaning. But he started trending towards the restoration side. You know, if somebody knows that you are carpet cleaning, you know, you can suck up the water. So I was probably, I don't even know, 10, 12 years old, something like that, where I probably wasn't getting paid anything. I was just, you know, the kid behind my dad, pulling hoses, just making sure I was helping out any way I could. And then after that, you know, getting into high school, I could finally drive. I was doing some janitorial. I was working for him during the summers, doing mitigation work, and then starting to get into the repair side, drywall painting and all that stuff.
So you started at a very young age, but obviously you've got a passion for restoration or else you wouldn't be in it all these years later, right?
It's funny because when I started out, or even while I was a teenager, I was pretty certain I was not going to do this when I grow up. You know, life happens, and I had gotten married, went to school a little bit. That wasn't for me. Trying to figure out, what am I going to do in my life? And I was just going down some paths where I just wasn't happy with the type of work I was doing. And so my dad calls me up and he says, "Hey, I've got this opportunity. I've got an estimator that's leaving, and I purchased this class for Xactimate to get certified in Xactimate. How about you come back, be an estimator? And who knows, maybe at some point you can buy the business." And that was intriguing to me. And so my wife and I had some discussions and finally decided it was okay to come back. And after I went to this class for Xactimate, I was really hooked on what an estimator does. Okay. I love math. I do enjoy, you know, kind of it's not the same every day. I get to be out in the field. I get to be in the office. So it's just a great blend of everything. So really, really enjoyed what I was doing.
Do you prefer arguing with homeowners or arguing with insurance adjusters more?
If you ask anybody,
that knows me that I'll just argue with anyone and enjoy it. So
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. So how long between when you joined your father as an estimator, how long before you actually purchased the business from him?
yeah, so it was probably, I think it was 2002 when I came back to the business and did that class. I had worked for him, prior to that, but it's 2001 or 2002, somewhere in there.
Okay.
And I worked for him until, golly sakes, it was 17 years ago that I bought the company.
Okay.
So whatever the difference is there. So I worked for him for about 10 years, something like that.
Sounds good.
And so I was about 30 when my dad and I had a conversation. So he just never thought that we would grow beyond 1 million in the tiny town that we're in. And we are in a very small city. Moses Lake, maybe you've heard of it, but it's not one that's really on the map for a ton of people. So the city limits at that time, there might have been 20,000 people inside city limits. And we would have to drive an hour to get to probably 90,000 people, if that.
Okay.
And so, very small community, but I was like, no, we can do better. And we grew to 3 different offices, but just that one office, the main office, we were able to grow that to about 5 or 6 million. And then the other offices, we got up to pretty close to 9 million before I sold. So
in the time of you kind of taking the reins of the business now as the owner, what were some key decisions that you made that really accelerated the growth? Because we've got an audience of restoration owners, right? Some of them are in smaller markets like yours. Some of them are in the top 50 or top 100 most competitive markets in the country, right? So when you bought that business and you decided, you know what, I want to pour gasoline on this restoration machine, what were the things that you did that really accelerated growth for the restoration business?
first, what I did is made all the mistakes. So, no, really, I thought I could do it all. And my first year, we doubled in size. We went from 1 million to 2 million, but I was doing it almost all myself. And so that was not a good plan. And then there's a whole story, but I actually got hit with a lawsuit, from Thermopure. I don't know if you ever heard of them, but they're out of California, and they were suing me on a patent infringement. And that they actually went after quite a few companies, Surf Pro, John Donne, DKI, and they were getting settlements from a lot of companies. And then they started going after smaller companies. And myself and a guy out of Portland, we were the ones that said, no, we're going to fight. And we were probably two of the smallest companies they went after.
Wow.
And with the help of the RIA, we were able to stop them. So we won summary judgment, and then the RIA was able to get a settlement with them so that they stopped coming after the industry. So, but from that was 5 years of my life. It cost $400,000. So between buying the business, going through this lawsuit, expanding, I was like $1.6 million in debt, 5 years in.
Okay.
So the next 5 years, I had to figure out, how am I going to do this? And even while I was in the lawsuit. So one of the things that I became really good at was Xactimate, but not just, it doesn't matter what the software is that you use for your estimating. I had to determine my own pricing. So one of the things I did is I figured out how to create my own price list with an Xactimate. But the way I figured it out is I created this labor rate calculator that anybody can use, and it doesn't matter the software you're using. It will help you determine what is the margin that I actually need based on my financials. And so once I did that, I went from, Xactimate at the time for my area was like $50 an hour for a finished carpenter. I could not make money on that.
Right.
So I was doing my own price list, and I was also doing pricing feedback back to, at the time, Exactware. It steadily climbed. Not just my pricing, but Xactimate's pricing steadily climbed because I was giving this feedback. And I'm like, man, there's something to this. So I started sharing it with other people, and I became an Xactimate certified trainer. And then I wrote an article, and I actually won an award for this article. And it was helping people make their own price list and do the pricing feedback. So now I'm making really good margins. The margins that I should be making based on my financials. So that was one of the things, is just learn your financials, learn the difference between markup and margin, learn, what is it that makes it so I can be, too many people in this industry all right, I'm just going to apply a 40% margin to this estimate. They don't know if that's what the estimate yields or not. If the estimate only yields 32% and you're budgeting for 40%, well, you're probably not going to make 8%, right? But on the flip side, your estimate may yield 48% and you budgeted it for 40%. You lost out on the opportunity of 8% in margin and you never knew it. And that's because we just automatically apply whatever it is. I hear 40%, 42%, 45%, whatever it is. We don't even know if the estimate yields that. So I created some reports that help people figure that out. But Xactimate's actually got a really nice report that tells you what the budget is. Not what you want it to be, but what it is. And then if you know that, we'll make your changes to the estimate or figure out what you can do with your sub afterwards. But when you're just applying something that, okay, I know that that's the margin you need, but you can't force the estimate to do that.
So two things here, Ben. First being, it doesn't sound like there was obviously you went out and you got more new business, but it sounds like rather than focusing exclusively on driving a new business, you're like, hey, let's take the existing jobs that we already do and find a systematic way to make sure that we're capitalizing and making the absolute top dollar on those jobs. Am I hearing that right?
Yes, 100%.
All right. Now,
so
go ahead.
I think we were also able to figure out, because we were doing well, right? We grew, so it was more sales, but there are those jobs, Clinton, that it's not getting paid for by insurance. Somebody needs help. If I know what my margins are, then I know who I can help and how much I can help with.
The second part of that, and this is a conversation that you mentioned earlier, why do you think so many contractors confuse markup and margin? And kind of what's the financial impact when they make that mistake?
Yeah. So overhead and profit is debated in this industry, right? They see 20% and they get at least the contractor gets all in a huff because they're like, there's no way I can make it on 20%. What they don't know, it's even worse than that. It's not even 20% that you're getting. There is no way that O&P, overhead and profit, is reflected in that. First, overhead and profit are margin terms, not markup terms. We are applying it to the estimate in terms of markup. So when I apply a percentage on that estimate, it's a markup. So if I try to figure out, so here's a good example. If $100 is my cost and I apply 20%, that's $20. I get $120.
Okay.
That $20 as a percentage of the 100 is 20% markup. That $20 as a percentage of the 120, the total revenue, is 16.67. So that's like the easiest way I can explain it to people.
No, and that makes perfect sense. Now, you do a lot of consulting and training, working with restoration companies on just this, right? Understanding their numbers, understanding estimating, making sure that they're making top dollar on jobs. In all of your consulting and training work, what would you say is the number one pricing or estimating sin that you see consistently and repeatedly across restoration companies?
They might not like hearing this, but not understanding that there's actually margin built into the labor rates. Not only that, but just relying on a software for your pricing is a terrible, terrible mistake. The software companies themselves do not say that they are correct. They state that we need you to give us feedback. And Clinton, if I was to survey the entire country, I doubt that we even have 10% of the contractors providing feedback. If you want the price to be a certain amount, then give the feedback. Now, they're going to take an average of whatever that market has. But right now, if you just take their price and you keep using their price, it's like a spinning circle of death. You will only have, let's say it was at that $50 an hour for a carpenter. We'll just pretend that's still my price here. If I keep using that price and I don't give any feedback, then I am giving feedback. I'm saying $50 is okay. And so when you have, then there's also downward pressure from maybe carriers and TPAs. They use cost controls. If you are a preferred provider, they say you can't deviate from the price list. Now, what happens is contractors now feel they can't change the price. That's not true either. Just because that contract doesn't allow you to change the price in that estimate does not mean you can't still give feedback for all your work, stating that this should be my labor rate. This should be my price.
Interesting. It's funny you mention that. It's a lot like on the digital marketing side, right? So we're feeding the Google algorithm back what a good lead looks like, right? So if we don't tell Google, hey, this is what a good lead looks like, it's going to keep sending us crap leads, right?
Yes.
So it's very, very similar concept there. All right. So you spent the time with JRCC. You exited that business how many years ago?
Just recently. So I sold the business about 3 years ago, but I continued working for the company that bought that out, right? So I was bought out by private equity. And it's only been 3 months ago that I joined DocuSketch.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about your role at DocuSketch. I've had the privilege of having another one of their client success managers on here, Holly, absolute gem, lot of value, talking about the platform and how restoration companies are using their technology to really secure more commercial opportunities there. Talk a little bit about what you do as an enterprise consultant over at DocuSketch.
So I typically work with larger companies that we are giving them kind of that white glove service, right? Yeah. But mostly with the contractors that want to utilize our estimating platform. So if you don't use our software correctly, then we're not going to give you a good estimate. It's garbage in, garbage out.
Okay.
But if you use it properly, so when I did have my company, the thing that really drew me towards DocuSketch over anyone else in that space was the ability to create what's called a timeline. So if I go out there, I can do a 360 of what it looks like before I even get started. Now, if I were to show you a picture of a room before I even get started, you might see some wet carpet, but you don't know what's going on with the wall. You don't know if the vanity's okay just from a picture. But if I then do another 360 scan of the property after I do demolition and set up equipment, well, now I have the documentation that shows exactly how much equipment I used and where I put it. I can show exactly where I put my containment, my floor protection. It shows all the walls that I took out, insulation that I took out, the vanity I took out, whatever it is. Now I have this ability to have this side by side of a before and an after. And when I move that screen, I can see both screens at the same time. So I can be looking at a wall prior to it being tore out. I can see what kind of baseboard and everything. And then on the same screen, just on the other side of it, I can see that it's tore out. I can make an estimate in no time and very accurate. So if I teach people how to use our software properly, all of a sudden, how fast and how efficient, cost efficient it is to use us. I mean, it's a game changer for these companies that are utilizing us. It just speeds up the process. Now you have project managers that are able to spend more time with the customer, schedule the job, budget it, quality control, get an approval. The estimating part is just the data entry portion.
Okay.
And that's what we're doing. And when we take that off your plate, one, it's being done more cost effectively, but two, now we're saving you time so that you can do all the money making opportunities in that position rather than a data entry part of the position.
I like that. And especially with these large enterprise level clients that you're working with, we're not talking about shaving tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. In a lot of cases, we're talking about shaving millions of dollars of extra data entry and labor costs for getting these jobs across the finish line. But because you've worked in this industry for so long, estimators, project managers, especially ones that have been in this industry for a few decades, they are very set in their way. They're set using their tools. So talk a little about the level of pushback that you might get from not necessarily the leadership team at these companies that are bringing you in, but the actual people that are day-to-day doing the work, right? The project managers, the estimators. What kind of pushback do you traditionally get from some of these large clients?
When I first went to a centralized type estimating, before I did, I was like, no way. Nobody can do an estimate better than I can going on site, getting it done, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was a pretty early adopter for it. But what I recognized is that you cannot scale with windshield time, because that's what you have to do is windshield time. And that's awful. So, but to convince others of it, what really helped me to go that direction is we had a freeze event in my area, a huge surge of work. We would not have been able to do it unless we switched to a more centralized estimating and going this process. So with, the project managers now, it's like, well, you have to try it. Let's just see how it goes. And usually when it really comes into play is when they get a huge surge event. Now they're weeks, months behind on getting stuff invoiced out, which is hurting their cash flow. They can't get it all done. And so now they're saying, oh, I need some help. Or they just try it and they're like, oh, that was actually pretty nice, right? But yeah, to let go control of anything, I think all of us have that fear, right? So
documentation really ties into profitability, and that's really the entire DocuSketch platform, right? What mistakes do you see folks make when it comes to scope, measurements, change orders that really cost restoration companies money, and how does DocuSketch kind of fix that?
It really depends on the person that's giving you the scope. So one thing, so I'll take that question in a couple of parts. One of the things that I see is they rely on a software they trust it to make money.
Okay.
For example, if you're doing a flood cut on a wall in a room, it might be DRY LF8. And so when you're replacing that and you put that in your estimate, that gives you half a sheet of drywall, 0.2 box of mud, and maybe 30 to 40 minutes of labor. Not one of those is enough to do that work. But the software is based on economies of scale. So if I take, let's go on the high side, $3 a square foot for drywall. If I apply that to one sheet of drywall, 32 square feet, right, that gives me $96. You can't get a sub to do that job for $96. Right. However, if you apply that to, let's say, a 2,000 square foot house, and you're going to do all the walls and ceilings. So that's 2,000 square feet of ceiling approximately, and maybe 4,000 square feet of walls. So, and all this is hypothetical, but let's say it's 6,000 square feet altogether. 6,000 times $3 a square foot is $18,000. I can find a sub to do that job. So it all depends on the economies of scale, right? That price is not necessarily the right price for one sheet, but it's the right price for, 100 sheets. So now we have to figure out, this software, because it's only based on this economies of scale, what is my true budget? And they just become data entry people. That's how the software has ruined us, is we go DRYLF8, because that's what it is. It's just data entry. Instead of thinking, I need one sheet of drywall, I need a box of mud, and I need about 6 to 8 hours. Right now, that's a budget. And now I can manipulate the software to include what I need as a budget. And so that's the big thing that I teach people now. What DocuSketch can do, I'm only as good as what you give me as a scope. So if you just give me a picture, it might turn out as a data entry type estimate. But if you give me a scope, so just last week I was doing a webinar and I was telling people, instead, do kind of an order of operations scope. And I don't care if you're doing it via video. So within our system, you can do a video of the room and you can narrate as you go. Mm-hmm. Or you can do talk to text and just give it your talking points of what that scope should be. You could write it down on a piece of paper, take a picture of that piece of paper, and embed it into our 360. Like, there's a million ways you can give us the scope.
Right.
But what I find is people that go out to do a scope, there is no organization to it. There's no order. So what I'm suggesting is create a template. And I don't care if it's ceiling to floor, floor to ceiling. That actually kind of drives me nuts. I'm more, can you do it in order of the construction?
Right.
Demolition, cleaning, framing, rough in, windows and exterior doors, insulation, drywall, paint, finishes, that's the order of operations. So if I just have, and what's funny is I made this, it's just a real operations list. There's 13 things. And I went into a bathroom at this office and I acted as if we're going to demolish the whole thing and put it all back together. I took this list and it was a very organized video. And then I did the talk to text. So I gave the scope by text, and now it's organized. I said I wanted this many sheets of drywall, right? I need this many boxes of mud. I need 3 sticks of trim. Now I'm giving whoever, it doesn't matter who the estimator is. Now I'm giving them actual data that they can make a good estimate on.
I like that. Now, as someone who's like embedded, right, in the technology part and the solutions that you guys offer over at DocuSketch, when you think about like documentation and like workflow features, do you feel like there's some that maybe haven't had that training, that they're underutilizing some of the critical features that you guys have available on the platform?
Oh, man. Yeah, even myself, before I came to work at DocuSketch, there was a couple things I didn't realize, right? So I didn't realize the more shots that you take, the more accurate your measurements get.
Yep.
Right? Now, timelines. I knew about timelines. That's really the reason I was sold on DocuSketch. But I don't see people utilizing these timelines, these before, during, and after 360 shots of the job. Why would you not? We don't charge anymore. You can do 2 timelines, 5, 10, 100. I can go higher, right? Like as many as you want, and there's no additional charge to do these timelines.
Okay.
And so that to me is probably the most underutilized and most important feature. But then comment images, comment videos. another very important feature. So many people don't realize. So if I try to send, and it doesn't matter what platform, could be DocuSketch or one of our competitors, that 360 image, a lot of adjusters are not able to open the link that I send them to see the tour. So that's a problem. Now, all this great documentation, I can't even get it to them. Well, what DocuSketch did is they made it so that every 360 turns into 6 cubic images. So that 360 is front, back, left, right, up, down.
Okay.
So each one of those is now a still photo. And so if I took 12 shots on the job and all of them add up to 6 images a piece, now I've got 72 pictures that I can send to the adjuster. Nobody else does that.
I like that. Now, audience, if you guys are listening to this isn't a guy that just works at DocuSketch, right? This is a guy that owned a restoration company just like you, utilized the technology, saw how it could impact estimating and margin protection. And then as he exited that business, had an opportunity to work with the folks over at DocuSketch. So that's really appreciate the value that you're bringing. You mentioned earlier the lawsuit that you had. You leaned heavily on RIA to help resolve that dispute. And now you're part of the RIA team. So talk a little bit about what you do over there.
Yeah. So I've volunteered to do different things over at the RIA. We've always been a member. My dad was a member before me. That's where he got a lot of education. But now my position there is to be the chairman of the Independent Pricing Task Force. So me and that team, we probably talk to Verisk and Cotality once every 2-3 months. And we just are bringing issues to them that we hear from our members. So, for example, some of the wording in the license agreement, it almost got taken out. And then we wanted a little bit stronger language in there so that everybody understands this is not the end all be all. Like, they need feedback from us, and we have the ability to change the pricing. Some of the other things, Cotality didn't have a lot of training out there. Now they have really stepped up their game with training for people. With Xactimate, there's a few things that they listen to us on. So the whole, they actually have a program now where you can become certified as a pricing specialist. And what happens is they rely on people that have the certification, especially for the feedback for our markets. And so anybody can become one of these specialists, and then you really understand and learn how to make your own pricing. So these are just some of the things that we've been able to do. But golly sakes, every month we are looking at different issues that this industry is facing, and we are just coming up with solutions or trying to figure out what can we do with this other partner in the restoration industry to make it so that it's benefiting the contractor.
Yeah, I like that. I every time I read articles, not necessarily on RIA, but across the message boards, everybody talking about claim volume being down again year over year. But I know firsthand from the call volume that we generate for our restoration companies as a digital marketing agency, that doesn't mean that there are less emergency water or less emergency fire and smoke opportunities out there. Just feels like those homeowners are a little gun shy when it comes to the claims process, right? They're worried about increased premiums or losing their coverage altogether. What are you seeing with the restorers that you're working with? Is their claim volume down, but that doesn't necessarily mean job volume is down, right?
Yeah, I think it just depends on the company. We are seeing these larger companies, whether it be franchises or maybe private equity type companies that have bought other companies, they are struggling a little bit because that's just a big beast to, feed. So there is still work out there, but if you've been in this industry for a while, like I have, we had very similar things happen, back in 2008, 2009. We had similar things happen, with just any kind of recession or, and when policy or when your deductibles go up, you'll start seeing the same thing happening. And that's what's happening right now. So what happens is people, they want multiple bids, or they want maybe to do it themselves. And so you have to pivot. You have to become more competitive if you want those, but you also have to work on your sales strategy. If you're being a donut dropper or a candy jar filler, that is not the answer. You got to look for ways to really feel what that target audience is and their pain. So agents, a lot of people and consultants are teaching you, it's how do you retain that customer? Well, that's all fine and good, but what are you doing to help them retain customers? Like, if you just say, I can do the job faster and whatever, no one cares. Sure. No one cares about that. If you're going after property management companies, or, one of the big ones I would do with my business was school maintenance directors. We would get a lot of schoolwork because we chose to target the school maintenance directors. And we figured out that they needed help with their teams, right? They didn't have big budgets. It was always really tight because maybe the levy or the bond didn't pass, and, they didn't get what they needed. And so they were the first ones that had to lay people off and do without. And so these maintenance teams, they are the bread and butter. These are the people that you're going to work with if you have a job. So we would do stuff like, who's got the best attendance? And we would do little things like, all right, we'll do a gift certificate and a little certificate of appreciation for somebody that had the best attendance at work. It could be a cultural award. So we would do these little things for them, but then we would provide education for their people. It was all about building the culture of their team. That's what they cared about. Had nothing to do with mold, fire, water. We were just there to help them with the culture of their team. And then all of a sudden we became like their go-to for any expert advice on, there's this funny smell this teacher has. There was so much work that we didn't get that we were just helping them with. It was just free consulting.
Right.
But when the crap hit the fan and they got a bigger job, we were the people that they called in. And so you can figure out the same thing with plumbers, with agents, with whoever. I'm not a consultant for sales and marketing, but, if I was going to say something as far as what DocuSketch can do, I just told you about the timelines and how you can show that before and after. If I'm showing just the disaster that happens and then what we do afterwards and how beautiful it is later on, and I can show that before and after, and then I tag my team members or I tag subcontractors that helped me or whoever it is, and I put that out on social media, that's the most liked post because it's real. It's not AI generated. I'm tagging real people. Their friends and families are proud of what you're doing, proud of what they're doing. They are liking and sharing that. It's not this, happy Thanksgiving post from all of us that no one cares. No one cares about that, right? And those are the posts that you see more often. So when it's the real, kind of dirty jobs look, this is what we really do. And these are the team members that made it happen. Once you start making it personal to the people that did the work, and you use the software to do that for you, that's also very powerful.
Ben, we do featured projects for some of the restoration companies that we work with on the agency side, right? And I love that idea, right? Using DocuSketch technology, capturing those images, capturing those scans, sharing them on social media, and the idea of tagging specific team members or subcontractors that help put that thing together. It shares that story with the folks in your timeline, the folks in their timeline, and you never know who's watching, right? You never know what they're just getting ready to experience. So it could just be a domino effect of additional business for you. That you may not be in the sales edge, but those were some pearls of wisdom that you're sharing with the audience right there, Ben. All right. Before we let you go, Ben, first of all, we really appreciate all the value that you brought to today's episode. For the folks that are curious about working with you, talk a little bit about like how people can learn a little bit more from you, right? What services, like trainings, webinars you've got coming up, and then obviously the work you do with DocuSketch.
Yeah, anything that we're going to be doing, you can go to the DocuSketch website. It'll be there. If you want to reach out directly, I can probably hand out my email. I don't know if that's
we'll drop it. People watch this while they're driving, so we'll drop it in the show days, the YouTube description there. We don't want anybody to wrecking their service vehicle there.
No. So anyways, everything we're talking about. So I'm doing a class next week. We had some webinars that we were doing the last 2 months. We're always just trying to put out content and education. So, and then hopefully you're seeing it on social media or an email blast or something like that. But yeah, there's always stuff that we're trying to put out there.
Ben, those trainings and webinars, are those available to anybody, any restorer in the industry, or are they specifically for DocuSketch class?
Nope. It's for everyone.
All right, great.
Well, actually, if I'm going to be honest, we're trying to get the ones that are not necessarily DocuSketch so they can see what we're doing, right? So it's for everybody.
All right. So whether you guys are currently using the DocuSketch platform or not, Ben and the team over at DocuSketch do a great job of putting together some educational content. So whether it's webinars, trainings, we're going to put a link in the show notes to take you there so that you can find out a little bit more. Ben, again, an absolute pleasure. I love somebody like you with so much experience in the restoration industry. I mean, you've literally worn every hat, from day labor that wasn't being paid by your father. We won't talk about child labor laws or anything.
No.
Then you exited the restoration industry, thought you were going to do something different, and Dad drew you back into the industry. So, and we're happy to have you. You're definitely not just a great educational voice, but you really have become a champion for restorers, especially on the pricing component there. So we appreciate all the work that you do, Ben.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks so much for having me, Clint.
All right, guys.
This was a really good experience.
I'm glad. If you like what you heard today, please make sure you guys follow us, like us, subscribe to us, follow us on YouTube. And if you really enjoyed the conversation that we had with Ben today, make sure you leave one of those 5-star reviews. It helps us reach more restorers that may get some value out of this content. So again, Ben, thank you again. We want to thank the team at DocuSketch for setting up today's interview. We'll be back next week with a little bit more educational content, hopefully with people as smart as Ben to give us some more insight on how to win the restorer battle. Thanks again, Ben.
All right. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Restoration Pros Unplugged podcast. If you like what you heard today, be sure to subscribe, share, and also leave us a 5-star review. We'll be back with more interviews and discussions with restoration industry leaders really soon. In the meantime, if you're a restoration company looking to add more high-value water jobs, you can reach me and my team at waterrestorationmarketing.net. Again, that's waterrestorationmarketing.net. I look forward to hearing from you soon.